She'd built a reputation shredding religious guests to pieces on live television. It was her brand. No mercy, no sentiment. Then one soft-spoken pastor came on the show and told a story so raw, so intimate, it cracked something in her. He spoke of forgiveness and final chances, and suddenly she was staring down a memory she'd buried the night her mother begged her to pray, and she refused. People didn't tune in for heartfelt moments. They wanted heat. Her show delivered. Verbal smackdowns, clever insults, and that unmistakable smirk that made you question whether she believed in anything at all. Rowan Dyer wasn't just another talk show host. She was a storm in a designer blazer. Razor-sharp, fast, unapologetically secular. On her set, faith wasn't off-limits. It was target practice. She'd faced off with priests, evangelists, miracle healers, even best-selling religious authors. Most of them left with their egos bruised. The day of the taping, the studio felt colder than usual. Rowan liked it that way. It kept her sharp. Her crew moved with quiet efficiency, checking cameras, adjusting lights. The mug on her desk was emblazoned with the words, "Faith is fiction," just in case her guest needed a reminder of who was running the show. Isaiah arrived early. No entourage, no script, just a well-used Bible tucked under one arm and a metal water bottle in the other. He wore a navy jacket, frayed slightly at the cuffs. He greeted the sound tech by name. He glanced at her assistant's name tag and smiled as he said it aloud, like it mattered. Rowan watched from just off stage, behind the curtain, arms folded. He didn't have the usual energy, no ego, no rehearsed sound bites. Just quiet. Steady. Her assistant leaned in and whispered. He didn't ask for the question list. Didn't even want to know the topics. Rowan raised an eyebrow, smirking. Of course not. He probably thinks God will improvise for him. Her crew chuckled, but she kept watching him. Most guests were either puffed up and eager to prove something or visibly nervous. Not him. He just sat in the guest chair, hands resting loosely in his lap, gaze wandering across the studio like he was waiting for something to begin, but not in any rush. When the red on air light lit up and the theme music played, Rowan switched gears, her voice smooth and practiced. Tonight's guest believes in invisible forces, things you can't measure, test, or verify. But hey, who am I to get in the way of it? The contrast was immediate. Her words were sharp and fluid, his slow and rooted. She launched into her opening volley. Contradictions in religious texts, polling data on belief decline, historical atrocities done in the name of God. Rowan wasn't cruel, but she was calculated. It was the game. She knew how to play it, and she usually won. But Isaiah didn't get rattled. He didn't raise his voice or mirror her intensity. He didn't respond to every challenge, just the ones that mattered. And when she asked, with that trademark arch of the brow, "You really believe prayer does anything at all?" He didn't even blink. "I do," he said simply, "because I've seen it." She opened her mouth to segue into the next takedown, but Isaiah beat her to it with a question. "Have you ever prayed for something, Ms. Dyer?" That stopped her cold. Rowan blinked. That wasn't on script. Not from him. Not live. Not here. She tilted her head, masking the flicker in her eyes with a smirk. "No, never saw the point. I asked people, not empty space." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few claps. Her crew exchanged amused glances. But Isaiah didn't smile. She leaned forward slightly. "Tell you what, Reverend. You say prayer works, right?" He nodded once. "Okay. A kid's born with a rare cancer. 5 years old. No treatment possible. The whole town prays. Parents pray. Everyone asks for healing. He dies anyway. So where's your God in that? Did they not ask hard enough?" The room went still. A few people in the audience looked down. Others turned to Isaiah, waiting for the cracks to show. But he didn't flinch. He shifted in his seat, folding his hands together. "I won't pretend I have neat answers," he said. "But I remember a hospital room. Little boy, just a bit older than 5. The doctor said he wouldn't last the night. Machines everywhere. His mother collapsed on the floor. She wasn't praying for a miracle. She was just praying to stay sane." Rowan interrupted. "And did she?" He looked at her steadily. "She did. That boy lived. Not because I'd say life isn't always something we can wrap in neat logic," he replied. "And sometimes, love shows up in ways we don't recognize until the storm passes." Rowan narrowed her gaze. "You're dodging." "I'm listening." That landed. Something shifted behind her eyes. She wasn't used to this. Wasn't used to a guest who didn't crack or fight or crumble under pressure. He wasn't sparring. He wasn't defending. He was just present. Like her questions were rain, and he was earth, not glass. So she went harder. You know what I think? Her voice was like a blade now. Faith's a cushion. People fall, get hit by life, and they need something soft to land on. So they invent a God who listens, who loves, who rescues. But really, it's just their own voice echoing back. Isaiah's smile stayed. Maybe, he said calmly. Or maybe, it's a voice that's been speaking all along, and we only start to hear it when we finally get quiet. But Rowan didn't want quiet. Not yet. She was still digging, still pressing. She clicked her pen and leaned. Tyler's mom, Denise, worked double shifts. His dad was doing time. Church folks would drop off food on weekends. I ran a youth group back then. Tyler came mostly for the hot dogs. Told me church wasn't his thing, but he liked my jokes. A few soft chuckles in the audience. Not from Isaiah. One Sunday, he didn't show up. Monday night, I got a call. He'd collapsed in gym class. They rushed him to Phoebe Putney Hospital. Internal bleeding. Doctors couldn't figure out why at first. Said it didn't look good. He paused, took a sip of water, eyes steady on Rowan. When I got there, his mom was outside the ER, curled up on a bench. No shoes. Knees scraped. I thought she'd fallen. But she hadn't. She'd been praying. Loud enough for the nurses to hear inside. Rowan tried to keep her face neutral, but her jaw tensed. They let me in. Machines everywhere. Tyler was pale, covered in wires. The nurses were whispering. And I remember standing there thinking, please, not like this. Not like this. She cut in, sharp. Did he survive or not? Isaiah gave a small smile. No. But he grew up curious. We still talk. He asks me things I don't always have answers to. But sometimes, when things get tough, he tells me he closes his eyes and thinks about that bench outside the hospital. About his mom, knees scraped, praying loud enough for the whole building to hear. That landed. Rowan didn't smile. Didn't scoff either. But something shifted in her eyes. A flicker, barely there. She shifted in her seat, glanced down at her notes though she didn't read them. Then cleared her throat. Reverend, you tell a good story. I'll give you that. But emotions, no matter how intense, aren't evidence. Stories like Tyler's, they're touching. But they don't prove anything. Isaiah nodded. They're not meant to prove. Just to remind. Remind us of what? That not everything real fits on a chart. She reached for her next question, but something strange happened. Not with her guest. With her. A crack, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. Not in the argument, in her. She hated it. Rowan let out a dry laugh, more from muscle memory than amusement. Not everything real is measurable. You should stitch that on a pillow and sell it at a church bazaar. Isaiah didn't laugh. Just looked at her. Not with smugness. Not with sympathy. Just patience. Calm and unflinching. Somehow, that rattled her more. She looked down at her cue cards, but the words refused to focus. Not from bad lighting. Not from poor print. But because her mind was hijacked by a memory no camera crew could film. Her mother. In a narrow hospice bed in Clearwater. The sterile scent of disinfectant. The steady hiss of oxygen. Her hand, so small then, clutching Rowan's wrist. Will you pray with me? She had asked. And Rowan had said no. Not because she didn't love her. Not because she wanted to be cruel. Her mother had been the gentle one. The believer. A woman who left soup on doorsteps and hummed old hymns while folding towels. The kind of woman who forgave people who didn't deserve it. Rowan hadn't cried at the funeral. Not during the burial. Not after. But now, years later, across from a quiet man talking about a boy named Tyler and a mother on her knees, something inside her gave way. Not a collapse. Just a tremor. She straightened, voice sharp. Let's move on. Community outreach. You run a kitchen in Georgia, right? How's that going? Isaiah didn't blink at the hard pivot. He followed. We serve 3 nights a week. Not just meals. Conversation. Company. A place where no one gets asked to leave. And how many people stick around to hear the sermon during dinner? Rowan asked. Isaiah smiled gently. We don't preach at the table. That caught her off guard. So, what? You're not using food to sell the message. No, he said. We're offering food because everyone deserves dignity. Rowan blinked. That line, clean, solid, unexpected, could have won a media award if someone on her writing team had come up with it. But this wasn't a soundbite she could rip apart without looking cold. She paused. That stopped her. Hope had always struck Rowan as delicate, even naive, a word people used when they couldn't handle hard truths. But hearing it from him, it didn't feel cheap. It felt like something torn. Her throat tightened. She swallowed. You know, she began, softer now, when my mom was dying, she asked me to pray. Isaiah didn't interrupt. Just listened. I told her no. Said it wouldn't help. That I'd rather be honest than give her some empty ritual. Her grip tightened on the edge of the desk. I'm not asking you to stop, he replied calmly. I'm asking if you still believe you don't believe. That landed. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't combative. But it sliced through the shell she wore on set. She didn't respond right away. The studio felt smaller during commercial breaks. No music. No applause. Just hot lights and stillness. And somehow that made it all feel more real than when they were live. I think, she said finally, her voice slow and deliberate, I've spent so much time pulling apart other people's beliefs. I never stopped to examine what's left of mine. Isaiah nodded. We all build walls when we're afraid. Some people use belief. Others use facts. She met his gaze. You think I'm afraid? He wasn't preaching. He wasn't trying to convert her. And that's what made it so disarming. It was his quiet certainty, not his words, that made her chest feel tight again. She cleared her throat softly. Don't think this means you've won, she said, voice trying to sound firm. I didn't come to win. Then why are you here? Isaiah met her eyes, calm, still. To talk to you. She didn't ask why. She didn't want to. Something in her, the part that once demanded every answer, that built a career out of unraveling belief systems, wasn't gone. But it had grown still. The floor manager held up 5 fingers. Rowan slid her earpiece back in, aligned her papers like always. But when the red light blinked on, she didn't look at the camera. She looked at him. The show was back. But something about her had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, and everyone watching could feel it, even if they couldn't quite say how. The second half of the interview was technically shorter, but it felt longer, slower, like time stretched just a little differently inside the studio now. Rowan's words came more cautiously, not the grand kind. Not miracles with headlines. The quiet kind. The kind that looks like a stranger smiling when you need it most. Or someone covering your tab when your card won't swipe. Or forgiveness that shows up long before you've earned it. He paused, his voice soft but certain. Sometimes we think God should arrive with thunder. But maybe he's just the one handing you a napkin when you're too embarrassed to cry. Rowan's jaw tensed, but not from anger. It was restraint. Something had cracked, and she was holding it together. She looked down at her notes again, then closed the folder. No further questions, she said softly. The red light above the main camera blinked off. Segment over. The audience didn't applaud at first. Not because they didn't care, but because it didn't feel like a performance. Then someone stood. Then another. Not a standing ovation. Just recognition. Respect. Isaiah rose. Extended a hand. She took it. Mountains. That's what the photo showed. She unfolded it carefully and stared at it for a long moment. Outside her dressing room, her producer knocked. That segment's already going viral. Twitter's lit up. People want to know if you're okay, if something happened. She didn't answer. Because something had happened. She just didn't have words for it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. By the next morning, headlines had already started circulating. Talk show host left speechless by minister's story. Unexpected silence stops national broadcast. Faith versus facts. The interview no one saw coming. Clips from the show flooded every corner of the internet. Not because of a dramatic argument or a shocking statement, but because of what didn't happen. No big confrontation. No flashy rebuttals. Just something honest. Something real. And people felt it. Over the next week, thousands of emails poured in. Some grateful. Some sarcastic. Others deeply personal. And for once, Rowan read every single one. She didn't make a public comment. Not yet. She needed time. Space. Maybe even a new kind of strength. Still, without her saying a word, people knew they had seen something rare, not a conversion, not a breakdown. Just the beginning of change. The kind that doesn't arrive with declarations, but doesn't require them either. 2 weeks passed before Rowan stepped back into the studio. The lights hadn't changed. Neither had the chairs. Her coffee mug still sat on the desk with its usual bold quote. But today, the message faced inward. The intro music rolled, the graphics ran, and the camera panned toward her. But Rowan didn't smile. She didn't make a quip. Didn't lean forward with that practiced glint in her eye. She just looked into the camera, calm, composed. I'm skipping the usual monologue today, she said, voice level. No jokes. No sarcasm. Just something honest. Behind the camera, the crew tensed. She hadn't told anyone she was going off script. Some of you watched our last episode, the one with Reverend Isaiah Colton. You've sent in thousands of messages. Some of you were moved, some of you were angry, and a few wondered if I'd finally lost it. She paused. I didn't. A breath. But something did shift. I listened. Really listened. And I didn't spend the time planning my next argument. That hasn't happened in a long while. Another pause. She glanced at her notes, then pushed them aside. A longer pause. She loved me anyway. And maybe that's what belief really is. Loving when it doesn't make sense. Holding on to hope when nothing around you tells you it's worth it. For the first time in the show's long run, she ended the segment early. No guest. No debate. Just her words. Hanging in the quiet. Online, the reaction was immediate. But this time, the headlines were different. Rowan Dyer shifts tone after unexpected interview. Famous host opens up about loss, doubt, and her late mother. Is this a new chapter for the Dyer exchange? And in her inbox? Messages flooded in again, this time from people who'd once believed and didn't anymore. From people who never had. From people who'd lost someone, or lost something, and hadn't found the language for it. Isaiah never followed up. Never called. Never sent a note. But weeks later, a small package arrived. No return label. No message on the box. Inside was a plain, hardcover book.